First matchmaking video, UFC fans. 299 just happened last night, and I'm going to go through the most important fighters on the card, match them up for who I think they should be fighting next. What's next for the UFC? That's always the next big question. Sean O'Malley just had a star-making performance against Chito Vera. Absolutely destroyed him for 5 rounds. Super impressive. Love watching him fight. Can't wait to watch him fight again. He needs a little time off. He just broke his foot. He's going to need some time off to recover. A broken foot's no joke. It's going to be hard for him to train. Now, he called out Ilia Topuria. If he calls out Ilia Topuria and he gets the fight in Spain, I only want to see him do it if it happens in the next couple months, but I know O'Malley needs time off, so I don't think the Ilia fight happens. And Dana also mentioned in the post-fight press conference, he doesn't like that. He doesn't like when guys jump to divisions when there are contenders sitting there waiting for him. If there was nobody to fight O'Malley, I'd say, yeah, go jump fight Ilia. That's a super fight. It'd be awesome to watch. I still even considered it. But you have 2 guys right now that are ready to fight for the belt, and you have a couple guys that are 1 fight away after that. So I think you got to stay in bantamweight. O'Malley, I want to fight the winner of an interim bantamweight title fight. I think you do Merab Dvalishvili versus Corey Sandhagen, interim bantamweight title fight at International Fight Week. Let it be the co-main or the third fight in the card if you're going to do 2 title fights. And you have the winner of that fight Sean O'Malley at the Sphere at UFC 306. I think that's a sick fight. I think that's an absolutely sick fight to happen if you have those 2 fight at International Fight Week, or even at 302 in June, early June. You have them fight O'Malley at 306 in the Sphere in September. I think that's a sick fight, so I want O'Malley to fight the winner of those 2 at the Sphere. Chito Vera lost, took a beating. Chito was more beat up than I've ever seen him beat up. He needs some time to rest. So that's the first thing I want to say is, Chito, take a lot of time, rest, get your chin healthy again. It looks like he had a broken orbital, broken cheekbone. He was beat up after that fight. I don't want to see him fight before the end of the year. I'm thinking December pay-per-view, a feature fight against the winner of a bantamweight fight between Kyler Phillips and Jonathan Martinez. Jonathan Martinez is an awesome fighter. I want to see him go up the rankings. I do think he needs a couple fights to get to the title shot. If he can get 3 wins in a row together, I think he's going to be next for the title at that point. But if Jonathan Martinez fights Kyler Phillips, and you're going to hear me talk about that a little bit later in this video, I think Chito should be ready to fight the winner in December. So Chito fights the winner of Jonathan Martinez versus Kyler Phillips, the December pay-per-view. Make it the 3rd fight from the top. It's the feature fight on the card. So it's not the main, it's not the co-main, it's the feature fight. Dustin Poirier had a stunning knockout win over Benoit Saint-Denis. I think what you do is match Justin up against the winner of the matchup that is headlining the BMF title fight at UFC 300, Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. The winner of that fight gets Dustin Poirier. Now, I do think Justin Gaethje deserves a title fight, but I know that Islam only fights once a year, and he's going to fight the winner of Arman versus Charles at the Saudi Arabia card probably, or I'm sorry, the Abu Dhabi card, because that's all they do is he fights once a year, and it's in Abu Dhabi, and it's stupid. I think Justin Gaethje needs to make some money. I think Dustin Poirier needs to make some money. I think Max Holloway needs to make some money. So when Gaethje and Holloway are done, I think you put the winner of that fight against Dustin Poirier as a co-main event 5-round fight at UFC 305 in August, wherever they put it. I think it would be sick if they had it in like Arizona. If they went back to Miami for 305, that would be sick. In the 305 for UFC 305, that would be awesome. But Poirier versus either of those 2 guys is a star-studded fight that will sell a ton of pay-per-views. Make it happen. He's fought in Max once. He beat Max in a super close, highly contested fight. And he's 1-1 with Gaethje. Gaethje just sparked him. If you beat one of those 2 guys, you start to get back in that title conversation again. And I know I don't want to keep seeing the same people regurgitated for the title, but if they keep winning fights, you got to give it to them. So Poirier versus the winner of Max versus Justin when they fight at 300. Benoit Saint-Denis showed all of us how much of a stud he really is. Even though he lost to Poirier, it was still a great performance from him. There's another fighter on this card that had a performance that left much to be desired. Now, originally I was thinking Jalen Turner versus Moicano's at 300. Why doesn't BSD fight the winner of that? I want him to fight Mateusz Gamrot. I want Mateusz Gamrot versus Benoit Saint-Denis to be the co-main event of the UFC fight night when they go to France later this year. And the winner of that starts taking their shot up the rankings again there, because I think those are two dudes that have incredibly good grappling, push a really good pace, have power. That's a high-level MMA fight. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think it's really, really hard. I think Gamrot needs to fight someone that's going to be able to stuff his takedowns or be able to outmatch him physically. I want to see what he can do against someone like that, and I want to see what Benoit Saint-Denis can do against someone that can really strongly grapple. I think this is the fight to make. UFC co-main event in France. Benoit Saint-Denis versus Mateusz Gamrot. Make it a 5-round co-main event. That'd be a sick fight. Michael Venom Page had a star-making performance against Kevin Holland. I keep saying star-making, but that's what the whole night was. It was a night of star-making performances. He destroyed Kevin Holland. I want him against Wonderboy. Now, if you haven't seen already, go check out the UFC 299 reactions video that we just posted. But MVP had such a good performance and has such a fun karate-type style that him going against Wonderboy is a dream fight. That fight is going to be an absolute banger. Two crazy, crazy styles. It's a good matchup. Either of them can win. MVP proved he belongs. Wonderboy has belonged for years at this point. That's the fight you make. Two of the most fun styles in the UFC. Match them up against each other. You do that at International Fight Week as the feature fight, or if you do that at International Fight Week as the fourth fight in the card, something like that, that's going to get the crowd going. That is going to be a sick fight. International Fight Week, MVP versus Wonderboy. That's the fight to make. Now, Kevin Holland got embarrassed. He got embarrassed by MVP. He got frustrated. He got cracked harder than I've ever seen him cracked. I'd like to see him take a little bit of time off. He is a very popular fighter. There's another fighter on this card that also got cracked. So these schedules work out well. I think if these two guys fight at September at the Sphere at 306 on the pay-per-view, it helps round that card out really nicely. Kevin Holland versus Gilbert Burns. Kevin Holland has fought a lot of guys thus far. Gilbert Burns has fought a lot of guys thus far, but they have not fought each other yet, and they are two staples of that welterweight division right now that have a lot of fights in the UFC. They fought a lot of talent, but they're not ready for top contendership. They're not title fight ready. But match them up against each other. I think the winner of that puts them back in a spot where they can start to fight up the rankings again in the top 5 maybe. Kevin Holland versus Gilbert Burns, UFC The Sphere on the pay-per-view. Open up the card with that fight. Jack Della Maddalena knocked out Gilbert Burns in round 3 with a sweet knee, and he made this really easy for me because he called out the most badass man in the division, Shavkat Rakhmonov, undefeated finisher who has finished every single fight he has been in. I think he's 17-0, 17 finishes. Not many people can do that. Shavkat just choked out Wonderboy. JDM just knocked out Burns. They're going to be ranked 4 and 2, I think. Bilal is going to get the next title shot against Leon. It's the right thing to do. It's what's going to happen. And I think in the meantime, UFC's going to Perth at the end of the year. Not the end of the year, but in the third, fourth quarter of the year. Jack Della Maddalena is from Perth. I think you do Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Jack Della Maddalena, 5-round co-main event to an Alexander Volkanovski headliner. And you do that in Perth in October when you go there, or September when you go there for a fight night card. That sells out an entire arena. Hell, I know it's a pay-per-view worthy fight, but if you put that as a co-main, you can really kind of just put whatever you want underneath it. People are going to tune in because that fight is going to be that damn good. So UFC Perth, JDM versus Shavkat Rakhmonov, 5-round co-main event. Next up, Petr Yan had a great win over Song Yadong. He has fought everybody that's up there already in that top 5, top 6, other than Chito Vera, but Chito Vera needs time, and I want Petr Yan to stay active. There's a guy fighting on UFC 300 that beat up Rob Font when he moved up to bantamweight. He's probably going to beat up Cody Garbrandt. I think Davison Figueiredo versus Petr Yan would be a sick fight. Two absolute gunslingers, great fighters. I think this is the fight to make because if you don't make it now, you might never get the chance to make it if Figgy ends up retiring or if Figgy ends up losing a fight and doesn't get that shot up. Figgy beats Garbrandt. He gets that shot up in the rankings. Petr Yan's got to just take another fight before he goes to the top 5 again. I think, and Petr Yan's ready for the top 5. I just don't want to see too many rematches yet. So I think you do Davison Figueiredo, Petr Yan, UFC Fight Night, 5-round co-main event. I'm liking these co-main events being 5 rounds. 5-round co-main event at UFC Saudi Arabia in June, or at UFC Abu Dhabi Fight Night card in August it is. So one of those two. I'd prefer to see them fight sooner rather than later, but with Figgy fighting at 300, I think it's going to make sense that they fight in August at UFC Abu Dhabi. So that's the move to make. Co-round main event, Figgy versus Yan, UFC Abu Dhabi in August. Song Yadong lost, but had a pretty impressive performance. He got his shot up at the rankings. He didn't break in. I think he's the perfect person to match against Umar Nurmagomedov. I think that makes for a very competitive fight. Song has great takedown defense. He has power in those hands. He's a good striker. He's got good cardio. He's a physically strong guy. Umar's going to be hard for him to just ragdoll him. And if we see Umar ragdoll Song, then we know Umar's legit as hell. I think that's the fight you make. I think you do Umar versus Song Yadong on the same exact card in Abu Dhabi, August 4th, that you're doing Petr versus Figgy. You make this fight as the main event because Umar's going to sell out in the Middle East. He just always does that. They love their Nurmagomedovs over there. So you have him main event against Song Yadong. That card's going to be sick. That fight is going to be sick. That's the one to make. It's a no-brainer, UFC. Make that fight. Umar doesn't deserve Sandhagen. Curtis Blaydes got his TKO win over Jaltun Almeida, and he called out Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall's going to have to defend the interim title, which I'm going to start calling the undisputed title, because if Jones isn't going to fight it against the actual top contender, he doesn't get the undisputed title. John Jones can kind of go fuck himself for all I care. So I'm going to go Aspinall versus Blaydes, rematch for the undisputed title. Blaydes won because Aspinall blew out his knee. We didn't get to see how that would go. I can't think of a more worthy contender. It's not Cyril Gane. Cyril Gane does not get infinite title fights after one win just because he's a handsome dude from France. He doesn't get that. Curtis Blaydes just beat a guy rocketing to the top in Jaltun Almeida. He has a win over Tom Aspinall, quote-unquote win, because it was due to injury. I'd like to see that fight made at UFC pay-per-view. I think it's going to be 304 in England in July for the undisputed heavyweight title, because John Jones doesn't get undisputed when he doesn't fight. So Tom Aspinall, Curtis Blaydes, main event, UFC 304 pay-per-view in England. That's the fight to make. Jaltun Almeida. Who's his next fight? Cut him. I don't want to watch him fight. He's boring. But in all seriousness, you can't cut him, because even if I'm actually okay with him going to the PFL and just having fun being boring over there and killing that organization, but it's not going to happen. He's a talented fighter. He's got to fight a grappler, I think, so we can see where he stands if he gets forced to stand on the feet. I'd like to see him fight Sergey Spivak. Now, I know Jaltun Almeida got knocked out, but it's more just because he kind of doesn't like getting hit in the head and he decided to go into the fetal position. I think he's ready for 301 in Brazil. In May, they fight in Brazil at UFC 301. I think you put him on the main card there against Sergey Spivak, a guy that needs a fight, needs it soon. He's a grappler. He constantly shoots takedowns. Almeida's going to try and, change position or shoot takedowns. It's going to be a grappler-on-grappler matchup, which usually makes them stand up and fight on the feet. So I'd be interested in that fight. UFC 301, Almeida versus Spivak in Brazil. Make that fight happen. Main card, feature fight. I don't want that as the co-main. I don't want it as the main. I want it as the feature fight. Macy Barber got a very, very convincing win over Caitlin Sarmanara, formerly Chukagian. Good fight. She's marketable. She's very attractive. She's actually fun to watch fight. I love her. And I think she should fight the loser of the number one title fight on March 30th in Atlantic City, Blanchfield and Fierro. Whoever loses that fight should fight Macy Barber next to get back into a number one contenders fight. I think that's the fight to make. Whoever loses Blanchfield versus Fierro, that's the fight you make for Macy Barber. And I think you do that. You have it on the prelims at International Fight Week. I think that's good. Or if it's Fierro that loses, you put them on the France card and you do it on the main card in France. We talked about Mateusz Gamrot. If he doesn't get BSD, I'd like to see him fight a rematch against Fiziev, but I think him versus BSD is a perfect fight. You also have RDA in that fight that lost. He's not getting the title. He's old. He's going to turn 40 soon. I don't want to see him in these number one contender fights. I'd like to see him gatekeep the top 15 in areas, but I'd also like to see him in Legends fights. So there's a Legends fight going on at UFC 300 between Jim Miller and Bobby Green. I want RDA to take on the winner of that fight. I would like RDA to take on the winner of that fight, and the winner of between RDA and the winner of that fight, I know I've said that a lot, can start making their shot up the rankings, because RDA showed promise against Gamrot, but he ended up just getting grappled because Gamrot likes to sniff crotch for hours. And RDA, he's still got the power. He's still slick. I'd like to see him fight a Legends fight, though. So he gets the winner of Jim Miller versus Bobby Green on UFC 300. This fight happens as a prelim on the prelim headliner on UFC 306 at the Sphere. Now, we talked a little bit about this in an earlier fight when we talked specifically about Chito Vera. Kyler Phillips is the next person we're going to talk about. I think you give him Jonathan Martinez, open up the main card at International Fight Week with that, because that is going to get the crowd going. That's a 6 strikers delight. It's going to be an awesome fight. Jonathan Martinez needs a fighter. I think he's super marketable once you get him going and popular. He's American with a Spanish or Hispanic heritage that markets really well in the UFC. And he's got a great stylistic matchup against Kyler Phillips. You can market Kyler Phillips because he trains with O'Malley too. High-level bantamweight fight. You want to get these guys' names out there. You put them on the main card at International Fight Week. Make it the opener of the main card. That's what you got to do. Jonathan Martinez, Kyler Phillips, main card opener, International Fight Week in June, on June 29th. Pedro Munoz lost another ranked fight. I think he's just in there to get paychecks at this point, but we need to see people start to filter back into the top 15. I think a good matchup for Pedro Munoz is going to be Adrian Yanez. I'd like to see Adrian Yanez versus Pedro Munoz as a co-main event on the next fight night they do in Austin, Texas, or if they do it in Dallas, Texas, hopefully coming up in this summer. If we can see Pedro Munoz versus Adrian Yanez, I think that's a sick fight. I think that's a fight people will want to see. Michel Pereira got to fight at UFC 301. He's got to. He had a sick performance. Took no damage against Michal and Jacek. UFC 301's in 2 months. Put him on it. It's in Brazil. He's Brazilian. I want him getting a shot into the top 15, and a guy that needs a fight that just fought in January and not that impressive of a performance was Chris Curtis. I think this fight bangs. I think they stand on the feet the whole time. There's going to be good body work from Pereira, good body work from Curtis. Curtis has a great chin. Pereira so far has looked like he has a good chin. I'd like to see that. So Michel Pereira versus Chris Curtis. UFC 301 in Brazil. Open up the main card with that fight. You can do it. It's a good fight. And lastly, Rebelis Despain got his first round knockout over Josh Parisian. I want him at International Fight Week to build his name. And because when you have hyped heavyweights, you give them the same people going up to get into the rankings. Next up for Rebelis Despain is Parker Porter. Fat heavyweight that has minimal skill, will always be in the UFC, and everybody loves to watch and see because it's funny just watching Parker Porter. He's kind of a meme, even though I actually like the guy. Like, he's just, I'll always tune in when he's fighting, not because it's overly entertaining, just because it's, everyone talks about it and it's just a funny thing. Him versus Rebelis Despain, that's the next step up from Parisian. So you do that at International Fight Week, make it a prelim. I think that's a good fight to make. This was the first UFC matchmaking video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know if you think that there's better matchups to do a final run through. And I'm not going to give you the events and everything just because that's going to take forever. I'm going to tell you who to fight who. It's Despain versus Parker Porter. It's Michel Pereira versus Chris Curtis. It's Pedro Munoz versus Adrian Yanez. It's Kyler Phillips versus Jonathan Martinez. It's RDA versus the winner of Jim Miller, Bobby Green. It's Macy Barber versus the loser of Blanchfield Fiaro. It's Almeida versus Spivak. It's Blades versus Aspinall in a title fight. It's Yadong versus Umar Nurmagomedov. It's Petr Yan versus Figgy. JDM versus Shavkat. Kevin Holland versus Gilbert Burns. MVP versus Wonderboy. Must make that fucking fight. Benoit Saint Denis versus Mateusz Gamrot. Dustin Poirier versus the winner of Max versus Justin at UFC 300. Chito Vera versus the winner of Jonathan Martinez versus Kyler Phillips. And lastly, Sean O'Malley versus the winner of the interim bantamweight title fight between Corey Sandhagen and Merab Dvalishvili. Thank you for tuning in. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if there are better matchups. Really enjoyed doing this video. I think I'm going to do a lot more of them going forward if you guys like it.